Following in the wake of the civil war known as the Horus Heresy, Rabute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion, would begin taking steps to ensure that the Imperium of Man would never again be threatened by a similar such series of events. To this end, the Primarch would pen a text known as the Codex Astartes, which would not only come to serve as a guide for Space Marine military tactics and battlefield doctrine, but also as to how the Legione Astartes as a whole were to be organised from here on out. To prevent a single man from wielding the power that the arch-traitor Horus Lupercal had himself managed to acquire, the 9 loyalist Space Marine legions will be broken down and divided into a number of chapters, with each chapter to number no more than 1,000 warriors. While some of Guilliman's brothers were initially hesitant or even outright refused to adopt the tenets of the Codex, they would eventually come to accept his ideas, and thus, with the sole exception of the Salamanders, each legion would give rise to a number of successor chapters. This event would come to be known within official records as the Second Founding. Over the next 10,000 years, there would be at least an additional 26 such foundings, with each founding giving rise to an ever-increasing number of Space Marine chapters. By the end of the 41st millennium, at least 1,000 chapters were rumoured to exist. The majority of these chapters are capable of tracing their history all the way back to one of the 9 loyalist legions that fought during the course of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, and will often share a number of similarities, both physical and psychological in nature, with those other chapters who trace their origins back to the same primogenitor Primarch. With some chapters, however, it is not so easy to determine the truth behind their genetic heritage. In some cases, the records regarding the founding and the lineage of a particular chapter may have either become lost, destroyed, or have, for one reason or another, become classified to all but the highest ranking officials within the Imperial government. Despite such records being lost or sealed away, a number of these chapters may still retain some degree of knowledge regarding as to which of the first founding legions they are descended from, or at the very least have a rough idea in this regard. For others, however, such knowledge has been lost entirely, not just to the Administratum, but also to the chapter in question. As a result, many of these chapters, such as the Blood Ravens, will embark on a seemingly never-ending quest for knowledge in order to determine the truth of their origins. But this then leads into an important question, one that appears to have been overlooked despite its simplicity. If a chapter is currently unaware of its heritage and lineage, then why do they not simply subject their gene seed stocks to genetic testing in order to determine from which of the first founding legions they are descended from? Initially, it would appear that such an idea would be a relatively easy one to implement, as every Space Marine chapter that is officially recorded by the Imperium is legally required to submit a portion of their gene seed stocks on a semi-regular basis to the Adeptus Mechanicus in order to determine its level of stability and genetic purity. Should a chapter's gene seed stocks display levels of mutation or instability beyond tolerable levels, then the chapter will either be disbanded or simply purged. Because the gene seed ties of the Astartes are forced to undergo extensive genetic testing, one would imagine that such tests would be capable of determining the identity of a chapter's primogenitor Primarch. While this would appear to be a fairly reasonable assumption to make, such an idea would depend upon whether or not these gene seed types are inspected by individual members of the Mechanicus, or if they are instead screened by monopurpose servitors, which are themselves incapable of doing anything else other than calculating the levels of stability and genetic purity within the types that they are tasked with examining. If gene seed types are tested exclusively by servitors, then they will be unable to determine from which of the first founding legions a chapter is truly descended from, due to the simple fact that they had not been programmed to do so. If the Mechanicus indeed makes exclusive use of servitors when testing any gene seed stocks that they may receive, then is it instead possible for a chapter to perform such tests themselves to ascertain the identity of their gene father? As it stands, there have been a number of documented instances where Space Marine chapters appear to have demonstrated the ability to perform such genetic testing. For example, within the novel Phalanx, the sanguinary priests of the Angel's Sanguine chapter, after subjecting the gene seed stocks of the Renegade Soul Drinkers chapter to extensive testing, concluded that the chapter, despite officially being categorized as an Imperial Fist successor chapter, held no genetic ties to the 7th Legion whatsoever, as detailed with the following quote from Commander Gethsemar.
I am saying that Rogel Dorn is not your Primarch. I cannot say who is. The sanguinary priests have yet to complete their discourses on the matter. But Dorn's gene seed is among the most stable and recognizable of all those among the Adeptus Astartes, and there can be no doubt that the Soul Drinkers do not possess it. That is the news I came to the Phalanx to deliver. That is why the Angel Sanguine sought a place at this court.
Another example is shown within the novel Pandorax, as Seraphicus, an interrogator chaplain of the Dark Angels chapter, will make use of an apothecary's narthecium and reductor tools to extract the progenoid glands of slain traitor Astartes from the Black Legion so as to verify whether or not any of these warriors were originally members of the Fallen, those warriors of the original Dark Angels Legion that turned traitor during the course of the Horus Heresy. However, whether the Dark Angels are able to specifically determine from which of the first founding legions any particular source of gene seed is derived from, or if they are merely cross-referencing traitor progenoids with their chapter's own DNA signature, so as to uncover the identities of any potential fallen angels, is another matter entirely. Since these examples have shown that the Adeptus Astartes have the ability to test the DNA signatures of any gene seed samples that they are able to obtain, this would suggest that those chapters who remain unaware of their genetic heritage are fully capable of confirming their origins by testing their own gene seed stocks, or at the very least from a hypothetical standpoint. However, as mentioned earlier, this would depend upon whether or not the chapters in question have access to the relevant data regarding the various genetic signatures of the primogenitor Primarchs. While the sanguinary priests of the Angel Sanguine, as stated previously, were able to determine that the Soul Drinkers were not descended from the Imperial Fists, it is potentially possible that Commander Gethsemar was only able to confirm such information by cross-referencing the gene seed of the Soul Drinkers directly with that of the Imperial Fists themselves. After all, at that specific point in time, the remnants of the Soul Drinkers had been imprisoned upon the Phalanx, the fortress monastery and flagship of the Imperial Fist chapter, granting the Angels Sanguine access to the gene seed repository of the Imperial Fists so as to compare it with that of the Soul Drinkers. But then again, Gethsemar would also state how Dornian gene seed is amongst the most recognizable of all gene seed stocks, suggesting that the Adeptus Astartes are indeed capable of accessing the necessary data regarding a chapter's genetic heritage. If this were indeed the case, then what exactly is stopping a chapter that remains unaware of its heritage from cross-referencing their gene seed data with that found within official records? The first possibility may simply be due to potential degradation within a chapter's pre-existing gene seed stocks. Over the course of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, a number of gene seed flaws, both physical and psychological in nature, will begin to slowly manifest throughout the Legione Astartes. For example, the Blood Angels would over time develop a flaw known as the Red Thirst, which instills in those that succumb to it an unnatural hunger for blood, while the warriors of the Raven Guard would begin experiencing deficiencies within their melanchromic organ, resulting in their warriors developing pale skin and dark eyes. During the course of the Horus Heresy, such gene seed flaws will begin to manifest with an ever-increasing rapidity, due to the fact that accelerated gene seed cultivation techniques being utilized by many Space Marine legions, so as to quickly replenish their losses, were beginning to exacerbate these inherent defects. After the 9 Loyalist legions had been divided into chapters, following the introduction of the Codex Astartes, these flaws demonstrated by the legions would in turn be passed on to their descendants. But even then, different chapters descended from the same bloodline may begin to develop additional aberrations within their specific gene seed stocks independently of one another, to the point where such flaws may only begin to manifest exclusively within the ranks of a singular chapter. The Excoriators, for example, who are descended from the Imperial Fist Legion, have developed a unique psychological flaw within their gene seed, known as the Darkness, which causes those who succumb to it to fall into an intense seizure-like state as they relive the darkest and most sorrowful memories of their Primarch. Because of this, there is a chance that a chapter's gene seed can degrade to such an extent that it no longer becomes recognizable as to which Primarch it had originally been derived from. But if this were the case, then surely such degradation and degeneration would have been detected by the Adeptus Mechanicus upon inspecting the chapter's gene seed types. The next possibility could be due to the fact that the chapters in question sport a chimeric gene seed. If a chapter is utilizing a gene seed that had been spliced together from two different sources, possibly even more, then this could explain as to why it would be incredibly difficult to determine their genetic lineage, as their gene seed would no longer match the DNA profile of any singular Primarch, being only a partial match at best. Such a notion is not entirely unprecedented, as there have been multiple accounts of Astartes utilizing hybridized gene seed since the days of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, such as with the type of Black Shield warriors known as Chimerae. Even during the 41st millennium, there exist chapters who are heavily implied to utilize chimeric gene seed, such as the Relictors, whose gene seed is thought to have been derived from both Ultramarine and Dark Angel genetic stock, and the Minotaurs, whose gene seed is outright stated to be chimeric, even though the exact sources utilized in their hybridization remain shrouded in mystery. But given that the Relictor's gene seed is heavily implied, if not outright confirmed to be a hybridization of both Ultramarine and Dark Angel stock, as detailed within the May 2003 edition of White Dwarf magazine, then this would still suggest that, unless the Relictors themselves had full access to the relevant information regarding their history and founding, it is still possible to determine the source of a chapter's genetic heritage even when the chapter in question sports a hybridized gene seed. This then leads into the final and admittedly simplest possibility as to why a chapter doesn't subject their gene seed stocks to, for lack of a better term, a DNA test. Bureaucratic red tape. The bureaucratic and administrative arm of the Imperium, known appropriately enough as the Adeptus Administratum, is notorious for being both incredibly slow and highly inefficient, often to the point of absurdity, in spite of how important the organization is to Imperial society. In some instances, this can even result in entire departments being regarded as obsolete, only for its various adepts to continue undertaking their duties even when it no longer serves any logical or practical purpose. Not only this, but whenever a world requests military aid from raiders or Xenos forces, the Administratum can often take so long to respond that by the time they receive such missives, the danger may have ultimately passed, been repelled, or the world in question was simply destroyed. The only major exception in this regard is shown with those worlds that are of key strategic importance or religious significance for the Imperium at large, such as with the Imperial Throne World of Terror, or, prior to the events of the 13th Black Crusade, the Fortress World of Cadia. Because of this, it's logical to assume that should a Space Marine chapter attempt to requisition the relevant data and paperwork regarding gene seed testing, that their requests may take decades, centuries, or perhaps even millennia to be processed by the relevant adepts. As such, it's entirely possible that a number of chapters may have petitioned the Administratum for the relevant documents centuries ago in an attempt to uncover their origins, only to still be waiting for the wheels of Imperial bureaucracy to turn even to this day. Whatever the truth may be, we can only speculate as to why these particular chapters continue to remain unaware of their heritage and lineage. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.